My name is Leila Abed, and I'm the director of the Dialogues Mexico program. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the official launch of the USMCA Chapter 19 Digital Trade Executive Report and 2026 Review Outlook, which you can now access and download on the Dialogues website. Today's launch is more than the release of a report. It is an opportunity to reflect on how far the region has come in building a competitive, secure, and innovative digital ecosystem, and to look ahead to what must be done as we are actively preparing for the 2026 review of the USMCA. To do so, the Mexico program created a digital trade and AI task force comprised by private sector representatives, policymakers, experts, academics, and members of civil society. The task force members served as strategic advisors throughout this whole process, providing key insights and guidance on all issues relating to digital trade and artificial intelligence. The Mexico program's Digital Trade and AI Task Force will continue to convene in the months ahead to produce subsequent publications, so please keep an eye for those in the very near future. Yet the authors of this booklet really brought those ideas to life, and we extend our deepest gratitude to each and every one of them for their invaluable contributions to this report. I also want to take this opportunity to recognize the hard work of the members of the Mexico program, Senior Associate Maria Calderon and Program Associate Anna Kurchenko. And so let me move very quickly to talk about why we did this, right? I think we can all agree that North America is at a turning point. As the USMCA approaches its mandatory 2026 review, the region faces a digital landscape transformed by AI, evolving data governance models, growing cybersecurity threats, and shifting regulatory frameworks, developments that far exceed what negotiators anticipated in 2018 and 2019. Among many other things, this report argues that the review process is a strategic opportunity to modernize the agreement's digital architecture, strengthen regional competitiveness, and build a more integrated and resilient digital North America. The report's guiding principle is that North America does not need necessarily uniform regulations to function as a competitive digital bloc. Instead, the report says it needs issues and features such as interoperable frameworks, predictable rules, transparent dispute resolution mechanisms, coordinated approaches to AI, privacy, cybersecurity, telecom, and SME readiness. This strategy enhances sovereignty while strengthening regional resilience, reducing fragmentation, and positioning North America as a global standard setter in digital and AI governance. To this end, every chapter offers a series of concrete recommendations that we hope will aid policymakers in all three countries navigate a never-growing, complex digital landscape. In sum, the 2026 USMCA review represents a rare and time-sensitive opportunity to build a secure, innovative, and competitive North American digital ecosystem. Modernizing Chapter 19 and strengthening cooperation on all of these issues will determine whether the region can lead globally or whether it will fall behind amid rapid technological change. And so with that, I now have the great pleasure of introducing the moderator for our first panel, Yolanda Martinez, Practice Manager for Digital Development in Latin America and the Caribbean at the World Bank Group. You can find her full bio, as well as those of all of our speakers, on the Dialogues website. A quick reminder of the structure of today's webinar. The first panel, titled Toward the Stronger Digital North America, will run from 10:05 until 10:50 a.m. Eastern Time. We will take a brief 10-minute break between the first and the second panels. The second panel, titled Building a Connected and Secure North America, Mexico's Digital Policy in Action, will start promptly at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I want to thank you all again for joining us this morning. And with that, over to you, Yolanda. Thank you so much for being here and moderating this exciting panel.
Thank you so much, Lila, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure, but also an honor to be moderating this amazing set of experts. I had the opportunity to actively participate in 2018 in the negotiation process as National Digital Strategy Coordinator for Mexico. So I truly value the insights put in the report. It's extremely timely since the 2026 review process presents a very good opportunity to update all the different articles under the chapters to be fit for present, not for future. As Lila kindly referred to, we have a completely different digital landscape, a lot of institutional changes as well in the three countries. So I really enjoy reading that report, and it's an honor to introduce to you the authors and the panelists of this first segment. So we have with us Cici de la Peña. She is director of the Mexican Academy for Cybersecurity and Digital Law. She's also the director and founder of DOT Network. And over the past 9 years, De La Peña has focused on developing regulatory frameworks in the digital sector and on public policy for the internet. From 2015 to 2018, she coordinated the international agenda for Mexico National Digital Strategy, where she was a part of the negotiating team for Chapter 19 on digital trade in the USMCA agreement. We also have with us Jameen Trones. She's the executive director of the Center for North American Prosperity and Security. She has over 15 years experience in program leadership in international affairs, governance, and development sector. She is a leading expert on North American relations and governance, particularly trade and security affairs. Her research and contributions on the USMCA review have been key to the analysts and decision makers across the region, especially in how evolving policies, digital service, and regulatory issues are reshaping the continental partnership. And we also have with us in this first segment, Sofia Perez Jasque. She is the General Director of the Mexican Association of Information Technology Industry, AMITI, in Mexico. She holds a degree in international business and has more than 20 years of experience leading initiatives in digital transformation, innovation policy, and gender inclusion across Mexico and Latin America. And to get this conversation started, I would like to give the floor for a first round of introduction remarks. As Lila mentioned, the report was released yesterday, and Cici and Jameen drafted Chapter 1 and Sofia Chapter 2. So the objective over this first round of intervention is to share with the audience the scope of the content of this first introductory analysis, very interesting content on the challenges in the implementation that was taken as an input for then the policy recommendations that each of you kindly reflect in that report. So we're going to get started with Cici. The floor is yours. You're muted, Cici.
Thank you. The usual stuff, technology. Thank you very much. I'm really honored to be in this exercise. Congratulations to the dialogue, to the Inter-American dialogue, for putting this exercise together in order to identify what is the challenges ahead for the next year in a very important trade relationship. I'm really honored to be with this pool of professionals writing this chapter or this document, and I think it's going to be very valuable. So having said that, I really want to identify, or I really want to say what was, from our point of view, the Chapter 1, Chapter 19, the Chapter 19 of digital trade in the previous NAFTA, renamed TEMEC or USMCA, was basically an additional of the previous trade digital agreement, NAFTA agreement. I mean, given the fact that this chapter wasn't included when the NAFTA was negotiated, then the inclusion of this chapter was very relevant, given the fact that now digital economy is the new economy. Chapter 19, in my point of view, set up the very basic foundations of what is the framework of the whole digital economy. When we are talking about digital platforms, artificial intelligence, and all the framework about that are put in those clauses. So reviewing them now is going to be very important. And additionally, given the fact that technology and this landscape has changed amazingly in a very rapid in a very fast and rapid dynamic. So addressing Chapter 19 from my point of view is something very, very relevant in how we are going to deal for the next couple of years, for not only for specific technologies, but basically for the whole, as it provides the foundations for it. Yep.
Thank you, Cici. And I do remember, no, in the initial negotiation tables, no, how different views came when we were very actively proposing all the digital elements within the chapter. So a lot of learnings also from these initial years of implementation. And maybe, Jamin, you can share with us, complementing Cici's intro remarks, what would be maybe the main lessons so far to the implementation of the treaty?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I think it's interesting here. My background is more on the Canada-US side, but that's one reason why I think it's relevant to bring me into this discussion, because there haven't been that many issues that have been adjudicated on the digital side. But Canada had a very well-known and recent example that is very pertinent to the renegotiation or the rewriting of any of the digital chapters, and that is that Canada and the US had a recent dispute with the digital services tax, or the DST. So Canada had implemented a retroactive tax that was retroactive to 2022, which would have required government agencies that had, or sorry, companies that had over 20 million US or CAD, sorry, euros, I think actually, they wrote it weird, to pay a retroactive tax on digital services that they had sold within Canada. So this encompasses everything from, Shopify to Expedia to, Apple, and anybody who's got an online sales as service type of platform. Any of those services are things that could have been considered taxable under the law. And so if you look back for almost a 2-year period, coming up to 2025, when the bill would be coming due, a 3-year period, this is billions of dollars that companies had to put aside to pay a tax bill on their liability sheet. And that meant that they couldn't use that money to reinvest in things like innovation or expansion or hiring new workers across North America, because they were stuck in this. But because the thresholds were so high, it also meant that the majority of companies that were targeted by this legislation conveniently were American companies. And so those companies were able to argue to the office of the USTR that they had felt discriminated against for being American companies, because very, very few Canadian companies met that threshold. In fact, I think only Shopify may have met that threshold. And so because of that, the USTR couldn't look to any dispute resolution within Chapter 19. It had to look to other dispute resolutions to adjudicate this problem. And so they looked at Chapter 14 and 15, which dealt with non-discrimination of origin and fair treatment for other countries under the trade agreement, and challenged Canada on this. And so the challenge came over the course of 2024, well into 2025, and just 3 days before the tax bill was about to come due in Canada, it took President Trump telling Canadians that he was going to back out of trade agreement talks with Canada unless they acted on this swiftly. And correspondingly, Canada did back down. Instead of waiting for the trade tribunal to rule against them, which I believe it would have. I believe Canada would have lost any challenges that it had made, just because of the way that the law was written. It really did discriminate against American companies. That would have meant that then Canada may have had to pay that tax bill back. But it was a huge gamble with not a lot of win, and really had the frustration of many American companies And also, it froze a lot of innovation that would have happened in Canada because of that. So really, looking at the fit for purpose of the dispute resolutions of Chapter 19, there really isn't a lot of updating that has been done to make the dispute resolutions move fast enough and to take into consideration just the rapid change of pace that is needed, especially as we move into an AI environment, into a quantum potentially environment, and trying to foresee where technology will go from now until the next review is something that I think everyone is very curious about, but also it's very difficult to write those kinds of provisions. So Cece and I made a bunch of different recommendations, policy recommendations that you can read for each of those different issues. But one of the big ones is that the trade dispute resolutions need to work faster. They need to also take into consideration that the rules of origin are something that are important, but also that we as a community of North America need to start thinking more cohesively and comprehensively about our digital policies as countries. There still remains a number of digital issues that Canada has ruled that are potentially discriminatory against American companies. The Online Streaming Act and various other Canadian resolutions against American digital streamers and news companies that I think if taken to court, Canada might lose. But again, that's speculative. But it really speaks to how, unlike a lot of other trade, because data isn't a thing that you pick up and move across a border, it just flows freely. It's very difficult for people to consider it as something that is crossing borders. And how do you make sure that that free flow is guaranteed? And how do you monitor disputes over those flows of goods and services and service software as a service type of disputes in the year 2025 is one thing, but when we get to 6 years from now, it will be a completely different ball game. So.
No, totally. And I was reflecting as you kindly describe. And by the way, for the audience, the case study on the Canada's digital service tax is on page 8. And I think it really reflects what comes into a negotiation table and then what do that means in reality during the implementation, and how these important lessons need to be captured to facilitate as well how the new treaty need to put these type of elements in place. And retaking the topic of agility in dispute resolution, I think this comes very in hand with what Sophia wrote about in chapter 2 of that report, which is the role of SMEs. And as we move into a more sophisticated digital economy, now we have a lot of SMEs in the 3 countries that are highly specialized, that are knowledge-based SMEs, that are AI-driven SMEs, and the playground is completely different from a treaty framework perspective. So, Sophia, over to you.
Thank you, Yolanda. Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation to be here. Also, I want to know that I wasn't alone. As Cece and Demi were together, I was working with Barbara Cochpois. Sorry for the bad of the last name of Barbara, but she is from Georgetown University. So we work together, and we make this chapter 2 possible. So first, as you were saying, Yolanda, I'm backing up something of Cece and Demi was telling us, like we framework this chapter 2 in digital inclusion of SMSEs, and this is not only one of the parts I am more passionate about how SMSEs can grow. I am now in Arizona in the trilateral conversation about chapter 25. So it has been really good to be here also and have this conversation with you. And we have addressed this issue in 2 main objectives. What is happening with SMSEs in the internal or in the national part, like Mexico alone, Canada alone, and US alone, and then as external barriers, what they are facing in the region, and what we need to grow SMSCs in digital inclusion, not only in the context of UMCA, in the context of economic development in the world, being this region, the region that has more, three countries has approximately 65%, 80% of SMSEs. So it's really important for our economy in the region. So we address this chapter 2 by this dual transformation agenda for North America, the internal and the external. Then we talk about a little bit of what is working and what we need to push in the region in this context of rapid digital transformation, the cross-border digital trade that also Jamie was mentioning, what is happening in the cybersecurity area. That's really important for SMSCs. Mexico is one of the most cyber attacks in the world, and they are addressed to SMSCs. So this is a really important focus in the digital inclusion and protection and information about the SMSCs. Also, we address in this chapter what is important of cross-border digital trade, the privacy and the cybersecurity regulation, data, this is really important, and how one of the main points that also we are, Barbara and I addressed in this chapter was about high cross-border payment costs, that really important for SMSCs, for product SMSCs, and also for the services that we are addressing in the chapter, the importance of the SMSCs that are focused in service. That's really important. The export of services between Mexico, US, Mexico, Canada, it's 85%, 95% of what we do in Mexico is export in services of US, and 62% for Canada. So it's a really important deal for us in SMSCs and what we are looking to ahead. So we talk about this context, we talk about the barriers, and we talk about, of course, the role of the UMCA and the importance of Chapter 19 in the free cross-border data flows and ban localization, the protection of the source of the codes and the algorithms for the SMSCs that are also IT sector or technological based SMSCs. Something important that the role of UMCA has enhanced and we are putting in this chapter is the legal recognition of electronic signatures and transactions. This is a whole new world that it's today, that what are you mentioning, Yolanda, for what is happening today, not in the future. And also the commitments that UMCA has addressed in the last years for reduced external barriers that can compensate the internal digital readers in the gaps. We know that we have challenges in Mexico. We know US and Canada also has challenges with SMSCs, but we know that UMCA can reduce this gap of the challenge with SMSCs if we have a strategy, not only in Chapter 19, but in all the chapters about the importance of the participation of SMSCs. And well, we address in this chapter 2, Barbara and I, 4 recommendations: capacity building, regulatory alignment, corporate SMSCs collaboration, not also with the procurement of the government, but in the chain of value with the big global companies. And for last and not least, the digital financial inclusion, that we know that we have a chapter in the UMCA that's only financial, but we think that SMSCs is, it has to be in all the chapters, and the digital finance and access for the SMSCs is a priority so they can grow better and more. And so we know with this intervention that Barbara and I made in Chapter 2, is our core message is North America cannot build a competitive digital economy without digitally capable SMSCs. That's our message and core message. And we know the region needs a domestic agenda focused on skills, financing, and infrastructure, and a regional agenda focused on standards, data flow, and digital governance. So with these two layers, we can work together in the framework of UMCA and in the framework of the strategy for the region. So we can create a seamless digital market for where SMSs are empowered to innovate, export, and integrate into regional value chains. So that's what we talk about in this chapter, Yolanda. Thank you.
No, thank you, Sophia. And where Barbara is not here, but also thank you to Barbara, because I think the way you frame the discussion in terms of how relevant it is, the SMEs for an integrated market, brings the topic that is also very well reflected in the introductory section of the report. I know Claudia Del Pozo is going to be in the next section, but she reflects very well in the introductory remarks about how relevant it is to focus the conversation on coordination, no, and really aiming to create frameworks that can facilitate mutual recognition of digital signatures, digital ID, payments. So everything that is related to the systems, to the rules, to the institutions. And I would like to go back to Cici and Yamin and start with Cici. You know, Mexico has been going into a lot of reforms. You touch base on, for example, the new institutional setup for INAI, no? The new institutional setup for the telecommunications regulation. So how did you foresee in the policy recommendations that you drafted that the new USMCA should take this into account?
Yeah, no, that's very important. That's something I really would like to highlight that is very linked to what Sophia and Jamie just provided us in the Canada example and the description on how to integrate SMEs into the digital trade framework. We really need to bear in mind that a trade agreement, or at least this trade agreement, sets up the principles for the three countries to be working together. It doesn't mean that we are going to copy Canada's or USA's laws or regulatory frameworks. That doesn't mean we are only identifying principles to work together and to have this interchange of digital trade just very clear and sound. That, having said that, given the fact that every country has their own legal and regulatory framework, institutional as well, we really need to bear in mind that having set up our own framework, we really need to adapt those principles into how we are going to be doing this trade. Now, having said that, now, as you just mentioned, the chapter 1 listed a number of clauses that probably needs to be reviewed given the changes in the institutional structure that, at least from the Mexican point of view, we have been through. And also there have been some changes in policy directions and probably positions regarding the tech digital policies in the three countries. Having said that, the digital or this the digital policies and just develops very rapidly. So in the chapter we mentioned, I mean, we could write 3 books about it. I mean, and you know, when we were sat down at the negotiations of the digital trade chapter 5-6 years ago, it was very challenging, as you say, particularly for this chapter that nobody really knew very much about it because there wasn't a digital trade chapter in the original trade agreement. So as you say, lessons learned and a lot of things to debate there. So it was very interesting. But something that we just remark in that report, we're talking about the basic elements that we need to consider when we are developing all these technologies. Jamie mentioned it: free flow data, privacy, data localization. Responsibility for digital platforms, open data, which is very relevant now for the artificial intelligence framework, and that basically we haven't really thought about that that much in this period, in this last period, but now it's going to be very relevant for artificial intelligence. And this clause about open data is something very relevant that we need to consider in mind, having said, having with the challenges ahead that we have. Now, we have changes in the institutional structure in the three countries, and probably from the point of view of Mexico, this is something that we need to consider, given the fact that the free flow data framework in the TEMEC, in the digital trade chapter, was aligned to the CBPR in the APEC region. It was taken as an example. Now we have a global CBPR with new challenges, with new principles put into the table, and we need to consider that we have challenges, as you mentioned. The INAI at an institutional capacity is not there anymore, but we have them now included in the framework or in the structure in a way or another way, in a way or another one. We have them included in some government agencies, probably in the Digital Transformation Agency, or probably in the Ministry of Economy, or so many other government agencies, and we need to consider that. But we really need to think about how those principles need to be adjusted to the clauses that need to be renew or renegotiated or rethought about how we're going to adapt those clauses, which are the basic still. They are still the basic for our digital economy, free flow data, for example, but how those principles are going to adapt to the changes of the institutional capacity, not only at a local level, I mean, national level, but also at a global level and at a regional level. So we are talking, I mean, this free flow data is a very good example of how the CBPR system is going to be implemented with the new institutional capacity within Mexico, aligned to the three countries and aligned to the CBPR globally. That's an example. Another example, and that's something that we mentioned in there, is related to digital responsibility for platforms, content moderation, which is something that is an ongoing development. So having very rigid proposals or principles is going to be, I mean, for Mexico, having said that, for Mexico has been very difficult to implement this clause, particularly because this is changing so fast and all the time. So we probably should need to consider there. We made some recommendations in the report. We probably need to put them in the debate, open the debate. What is going to be the best thing for the region to address this, given the fact that this content moderation framework or realm has changed a lot in the last 5 years, with more actors coming into place. We also have other challenges in the institutional capacity. I just mentioned cybersecurity. We are with the new, from the Mexico side, we have the new Digital Transformation Agency. It has a general direction just particularly focused on cybersecurity to set up the public policy direction in that vertical, in that area. But that is also very linked and very it needs to be worked very closely with other government agencies, because we are not talking about only the economic impact of these cyber attacks, as Sophia mentioned, but we are also talking about national security issues regarding cybersecurity attacks. So this is the more we develop these technologies, the more complex the institutional capacity became within a country. And now the challenges now, if within a country is something of a challenge, now imagine this in a coordination with the three countries. That's going to be, I mean, it's not impossible. It's just we really need to sit down and rethink about how these challenges are going to be put in place. So I will also, I mean, I basically will encourage everybody to read the recommendations we put there. It will be impossible for me to go through all the with the challenges and the data and the comments that we put into the report. And particularly, I mean, I felt that that chapter stayed very, I mean, we could write 3 books only on digital trade chapter. I mean, and probably one book in each clause. You and I faced those challenges when we were on those negotiations, and that was something very amazing to see how it developed. So, in order for my colleagues to have more time to also contribute to this chat, I would just invite you guys to read the report and interact and open the discussions on what will need to be renegotiated, with the view that we have challenges that weren't included in that chapter, that is artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, quantum computing, and blockchain as well. And yeah, just an open invitation to continue this discussion, which is the main purpose of this report.
Yes, no, definitely. I totally agree. And I very much remind everyone that the American Dialogue is going to be hosting different events, different discussions in the 3 countries. And moving forward, also with maybe describing a little bit more the recommendations that I found extremely appealing to think through related to AI. Right? Because it's not only the data localization, it's not only the algorithm, ethical and regulatory frameworks that need to put in place, but also a lot of things that now are being done with AI. So if maybe Jamin can describe a little bit more the recommendations and what you found in terms of what should be the best way to moderate AI-generated content. How a lot of business that relate on AI and premises that we didn't have to think through in 2018, that today you even are talking about AI generated cyber attacks. So where is the liability when those things happen? So you can also elaborate a little bit more, because I found it very valuable to have this type of recommendations in the chapter. Over to you, Yami.
Yeah, so I think, getting back to what Sissy was just saying, a lot of it is about basic principles. And if you can get the basic principles right, then it allows you to have a solid foundation for collaboration across the 3 countries. Canada has an AI Safety Institute. The United States has a AI sort of safety governance institute. And Mexico is working, I understand, on getting something similar. But even with the AI safety and governance institutes across the world, they're so new and they're so perhaps underfunded because they're so new and so misunderstood because AI is seemingly very technical and difficult. It's hard for the average person to kind of wrap their heads around just how fast this is going to change society and make things and affect things like a trade treaty, for example. So it's really about getting those basic principles right, so that when it's time to adjudicate or look at a problem that arises from it, that that everybody is kind of on the same page. And so collaboration is really key, I think, for the 3 countries. But you also have issues where you have proprietary AI, you have IP that is something that people are not going to want to mess with. We also have issues where there's going to be disputes along data centers. So if an AI company in the United States has a data center in northern Canada, who owns that data? Where is it localized? All of these sorts of questions that we've never had before are going to be coming out. And so it really is talking about how AI and the IP behind AI and the electrons that live in AI, how they interchange, because there's going to be things that rise that we're going to need to talk about for quite some time, as we move forward on some of these issues. But one of the couple of the recommendations that we had talked about were also thinking about things like hostile actors. We want to make sure that we have common principles. We want to include mechanisms for regulatory cooperation on AI standards. So we prevent fragmentation, because when fragmentation happens, that's when disputes start to fester, and the countries really need to kind of nip those things in the bud before they grow out of control. We want to address data access for AI training. So how do we train these AI models behind the firewalls, for lack of a better term, to make them secure and safe before they're launched. But we also want to make sure we're doing that while respecting intellectual property and the privacy of the people who are engaging and whose work is being engaged by these LLMs. And we want to develop provisions ensuring SME participation and trading in AI ecosystems. We really need to get the groundwork kind of set in this era, and this is getting back to the principles of what trade looks like in an AI marketplace, and then making sure that we have transparency requirements for AI systems that are used in trade affecting decisions. So we almost with that kind of foresee a potential where there may be AI used as a trade mechanism resolute possibility. We don't know how AI is going to be used, but we know that AI legal models are already being used in some cases to adjudicate, on the lawyer side of things to keep costs down for some clients. And so you can anticipate a world even within a year from now where we have AI looking at both arguments as submitted and providing executive summaries to laymen about some of the issues that are going through it, and how we're looking at the transparency of some of those disputes when AI is involved. So there's a lot of issues. Again, as Cici said, we could write for days on these topics, but trying to get it back down to the basic principles at the granular level is really key for the trade review.
No, definitely. And as I was listening to Cici and to Yamin, I was really reflecting on something that is also very relevant and is captured very well by Sofia and Barbara, which is capacity development, right? We're talking about a digital landscape that is completely different from 2018, but to better navigate into new mechanisms for digital trade dispute resolution, where AI is involved, where content moderation has a different scale of challenge that requires a lot of capacity building on companies of all sizes, not only SMEs, to be able to internalize what is in it for me to better leverage the benefits as well of a trade agreement. And maybe Sofia, you can elaborate a little bit more on how you envisioned something that you put in the recommendations that I really like and share. We have an initiative together, Calvin Kulalak, which is how we can better enable through the treaty micro-credentials and training for SMEs. So if you can share with the audience about these proposals, what would be the models or institutions to scale this type of programs?
Yeah, thank you, Yolanda. And I agree what Cici and Jamie was talking is AI, it's one of the tools now, but we can tomorrow have another tool, and in 5 years, another tool and another tool and another tool. But that's why we have to frame all the collaboration in what is happening when we have another tool. And the IT sector is always changing every minute. So we have to have this. And what you are talking about, Yolanda, capacity building is really important for us, not only the IT sector company that I represent in Amity, but for all the companies around the world. In our case in Mexico, we have, and we know that the people that we are training to be prepared for these new tools, even you call it AI, or even you call it quantum, or even you call it doesn't matter. So, and of course we have to focus in SMSs, because SMSs has low capacity of have an IT sector or an innovation sector or department in their companies, because they are small and they have to focus in sale. But we know that we have to do different as countries. In Mexico, and with this initiative that Yolanda was saying in Mingula Lab, we launched 2 weeks ago a big employer micro-credentials program with the President Claudia Sheinbaum that we are leading in Amity. And we know that we as private sector has to put in the conversation the micro credentials that are necessary for the growth of the companies. And we know that even so we have the trainings in a specific sector like automotive or manufacturing, we have to have micro credentials in technological trainings. Even we are not engineers, no, even if we are not working in IT sector companies, we now need to know about cybersecurity, about how AI works, how to use the data that it's going through AI for my better productivity and process in our companies, and better so, all the information that we can know about digital trade, how to use technology to grow out our company. So in this chapter, Barbara and I mentioned this specific recommendation, focusing in micro credentials, because Cici and Jamie commented this, every day is something new. So if we wait to have a 2 years, 3 years mastery, we're going to be behind in 3 years. So this micro credentials is the new strategy to know about what is happening in today's future. That is the technology, the use of technology to grow the companies, but also to be more prepared and to have flourish strategies. Of course, in our chapter, we talk about the strategies for SMSEs and how these micro credentials can give the owners, the women and the men that are leading these SMSEs companies, to see the future today, to have this strategy today so they can be part of the global change of value. Because that is really important for us in the framework of UMCA, how we can address these micro credentials to focus to be in the chain of value so they can grow better in the region. So that's what we are talking about in this chapter, Yolanda, Cici, Jamie, and of course we think it has to address not only in the framework of UMCA, but in all the strategy of the countries.
No, thank you, Sophia. I found it very valuable to complement what is currently within the framework of the treaty, because at the end, an integrated market needs to reflect that it's easy to do business in the three countries, that it's easy to have free flow of data, of people, of ideas, of businesses, but that requires also a minimum level of standards on making sure the type of certifications that can guarantee that you are having digital transactions with a set of minimum requirements. We're over the time, so I would like to, first of all, thank you, Lila, Director for the Mexico program in the Inter-American Dialogo. I think this type of exercises bring a lot of value to make informed decisions, to really open the debate to all actors involved in a treaty that is extremely relevant for the economy of not only the three countries, but the world, right? Because at the end, these continental negotiations have a lot of effects. First of all, in the life of millions of people. And the policymakers sitting in the negotiation table need as much evidence, input, analysis that is available to represent each of the country's contexts and needs. And the fact that the report reflects this diversity in voices, in analysis, private sector, public sector, academia, is a very good exercise. So I invite everyone to follow closely the reflections that are there. I enjoy a lot and learn a lot about the implementation challenges, which I think are key to be very conscious about the relevance of having common principles on each of the chapters of the treaty, and be very proactive in bringing new elements, new ideas into what is needed to make this revision process as open and inclusive as it needs to be. So thank you so much for inviting me to moderate this conversation. And as it was mentioned in the beginning, we're going to go into a break of 10 minutes, and then the second panel with the other authors of the following chapters in the report are going to be joining. So thank you so much, Sophia. Thank you so much, Cici and Jamin. It was an honor to have this conversation with all of you too.
Welcome back to the second half of our webinar, which will focus on artificial intelligence governance and cybersecurity, digital trends in Mexico, and the telecommunications sector. For those of you who are just now joining the webinar, hi, I'm Lila Abed, the director of the Dialogues Mexico program, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the official launch of the USMCA Chapter 19 Digital Trade Executive Report and 2026 Review Outlook. A reminder that you can now access and download the report on the Dialogues website, as well as access the complete bios of our authors, moderators, and speakers. And so without further ado, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our next moderator, Claudia del Pozo, founder and director of the EON Institute. It's always a pleasure to work with you, Claudia, and thank you so much for all of your contributions to this report, and look forward to hearing yours, your insight, and that of your colleagues. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Lila. Thank you so much for having me, for having us. Oh, just a sec, my alarm's going on. There we go. Got Siri to behave. Hello, everyone. I'm Claudia Del Pozo. It's an honor to be here in this panel with such esteemed colleagues. We've worked together in the past, and it's just such a pleasure to see you here. So before I introduce everyone, I kind of want to set the context of this second panel. So we're less than a year away from a historic moment for the region. The 2026 review of the USMCA is no longer just something that's a commercial opportunity. It's a strategic opportunity to rethink how North America can position itself in a world shaped by AI, cybersecurity threats, and growing geopolitical competition around digital rules and standards. This is our opportunity. And one idea has come up throughout all of the papers, throughout all of the chapters written by my colleagues here. And it's this idea: North America doesn't need identical regulation to succeed. What we need is interoperability, smart coordination, and systems that work together even when each country maintains its own legal frameworks and institutional identity. That's key, and I'm excited to delve into that with my partners here today. And Mexico is at a really interesting point where it's just reshaped kind of its digital infrastructure, its digital sector, rather, would be the word. And it'll be interesting to hear a little more about what that means for the region. What does it look like for those of you who are listening from the US or Canada? And how can we be part of this constructive leadership from North America? So our panel today brings together 4 people who understand these challenges from different perspectives, and they'll be talking to us about AI governance and cybersecurity, regulatory transitions, and the telecommunications infrastructure that underpins everything in the region. So without further ado, allow me to introduce our wonderful panelists. So first up, if you can turn on your camera when I say your name, that would be wonderful. We have Kelly Wicker. She's the Vice President at the Center for Technology Innovation and Space of the Meridian International Center, and she's the author of Chapter 3 on AI governance and cybersecurity in North America. Chapter 3 was also written by Pablo Pruneda, who's the coordinator of the Law and AI Research Line, LIDIA, of the Legal Research Institute of UNAM, Mexico's National Autonomous University. He's also the director at Siglo XXII, Derecho y Tecnología, Century 22, Law and Technology. We also have Elena Estavillo joining us today. She's the founder and CEO of Centro I para la Sociedad del Futuro, Centro I for the Society of the Future. And she's the author of Chapter 4, Mexico's Evolving Digital Regulatory Landscape and the USMCA Digital Agenda. So it'll be exciting to hear from you, Elena, on all of these recent changes here in Mexico. And Alejandro Navarrete. He is the former head of the Radio Spectrum Unit at the Federal Telecommunications Institute here in Mexico. And he's the author of Chapter 4, of course, on telecommunications and cross-border connectivity. So everybody, it's so nice to see you. Thank you for joining today. I'm so excited to have this panel with all of you and dig into the incredible contributions you've made to this report. So I'd like to go through a brief round of opening remarks by all of you, and then we'll delve into your chapters. So please, Kelly, go ahead. And then we'll do Kelly, Pablo, Elena, Alejandro.
Thanks so much, Claudia, and thank you, Lila and Dialogue, for having me this morning. It's wonderful to be able to be a part of this event. And I really enjoyed co-authoring this chapter with Pablo because I learned a lot about the state of where Mexico is on these same questions. I think right now, what I am most interested in seeing happen with the USMCA is that the United States takes advantage of this opportunity to start really building something that can be a solution that's interoperable and harmonized that can be replicated around the world. We still don't know much about what the trade representative will be prioritizing for digital trade with the USMCA negotiations. But we do know a lot about what the United States wants to do in tech regulation. And we know that this administration is very interested in the United States becoming leaders in setting international standards for governance. I think that the best way we can do that is to join with our neighbors and friends in Canada and Mexico to build that regime that we can show works across 3 different countries, 3 very different systems. And then we can use that to make the case for a democratically based system of governance for AI, for cybersecurity, for tech that we can see replicate around the world. So that's my hope for this. And I think you can see that focus in the chapter that Pablo and I wrote together. And I'll pass it to Pablo.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Claudia. I want to start thanking Lila and Anna Kurchenko for the invitation and the privilege of working with Kelly, which I agree. I also learned not only from her knowledge of the technical implications of this matter, but also on the personal level that she's an example of the women, of the working women that also have the time to build a family. So that's something I want to say. When we talk about this chapter, we have to address the complexities of AI regulation. As we know, AI is a globally critical technology, and it has gone beyond the looking at a tool for business innovation. AI must be seen as an essential component of democratic life, of national security, of economic competitiveness. And in the view of the upcoming 2026 USMCA review, I agree with Claudia, this is an extraordinary opportunity to take a look at the positions of each and every one of the 3 countries and to establish some strategies and some alignments that work for the development of correct regulations. As we know, the regulation of AI has been probably one of the most complex challenges that we have faced in the recent history. And proof of it is the definition that we see, for example, in the European Union, where they are the first ones that established a regulation proposal and implemented it, or are trying to implement it. And now we see that they are backing away from their very strict regulation vision. No? And the other is we also see this reversing of a vision in the US, where we had this first proposition, and then the new administration is looking at a new way of understanding regulation with and emphasizing the geopolitical influence of this technology. And Mexico, which is a country that has not established a national strategy or a regulation, which allows us to be more flexible in the way that we address this challenge, and we align with the North American position and view. So that's my first position. Claudia, thank you, and I allow the next people to talk.
Thanks, Pablo. Elena, go ahead.
Hello, good morning. So what I'm going to talk about is how the digital regulatory ecosystem in Mexico has changed so much And it's natural and it's expected to do so because the digital technologies and markets and services are changing every day. But Mexico's recent trajectory shows some tension. On one hand, the goal of strengthening North American economic integration under the agreement, that is clear, especially digital trade provisions. They encourage cross-border data flows and discourage data localization. But on the other hand, we have a federal push to reinforce sovereignty, state capabilities, and control over critical infrastructure and data. In practice, this tension has produced a wave of reforms, as well as new laws, new authorities, more powers for centralized authorities, and the growing presence of state-owned enterprises in technology. And all of this mark a turning point for Mexico's digital governance model. And that also is changing. This new architecture seeks to support legitimate policy goals, and these goals are also shared by the other countries, Canada and the United States, in different levels. This is national security, digital government modernization, closing connectivity gaps, and protecting strategic assets. Yet, these policies increasingly intersect and sometimes collide with the agreement principles. And as a result, negotiations and implementation across North America may need to accommodate new nuances, exceptions, or adjusted interpretations. Mexico is exploring hybrid approaches, rules that ensure interoperability, for example, that is very important, that enable digital trade. And these are combining with measures that strengthen local capabilities like cloud and data center infrastructure, platform regulation, compute power, and digital industrial policies. This domestic transformation set the stage for a broader regional conversation that might include data protection, cybersecurity, and algorithmic governance. Also, technological sovereignty and cooperation in critical infrastructure and cybersecurity, competition neutrality and the role of the state, and digital rights and protection of vulnerable groups. And so I think that Mexico has a strategic opportunity to help shape an agreement strengthened with a digital new agenda. And the reforms underway could become the starting point for reaffirming regional principles of openness, transparency, and fairness, ensuring that digital transformation becomes a driver of shared prosperity and not new asymmetries.
Thanks, Elena. Let's definitely hope so. And I look forward to hearing more about your chapter on these changes. Alejandro, please, up to you. Whoops, you're just on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Claudia, very much, and thank you to Lila, Anna, and Maria for the invitation to be part of this project. I would like to say something because my chapter is on telecommunications, and the telecommunications are the backbone of all the digital economy. So whatever we do regarding digital economy would need to have a robust telecommunication infrastructure. So Mexico is, as just Elena said, is going through huge changes in the regulatory framework. We have new regulatory framework in telecommunications and also in the competition sector as well, economic competition sector. And all those changes, I think, are quite important for everyone to understand. Not only that they are there, but the consequences of those changes as well. That's why in my contribution, I tried to talk about the regulator itself, how the regulator is now going to work, or is working already here in Mexico, and what was the different stages for regulatory agencies for the telecommunications sector here in Mexico, and how that can have an impact in the connectivity and also in the cross-border relations regarding telecommunications as well. The regulatory landscape also, and the importance of coordination of frequency bands along the common border with the US. This is particularly important, not only because of the provision of telecommunications services, but for something that is quite, let's say, technical, but very important, that is to avoid harmful interference when both countries are deploying their mobile networks or any network that is using spectrum. So spectrum coordination along the common border with the US and Mexico is a key aspect to look at. Access to infrastructure is another point that is quite important here in Mexico in order to deploy faster new telecommunication networks, in particular 5G networks, and quite soon 6G networks. We are hoping to have the standards ready before 2030. So the deployment of the 6G is going to start quite soon also in the world. And also roaming agreements that we already have among different operators on both sides of the country. That's important. We also have that with Canada. Most of the mobile operators have roaming agreements with Canada and US operators as well. So we in North America can use our same, let's say, plan for mobile plan and use that seamlessly in the three countries. So that's another thing that is important to consider when new frequency bands are going to be assigned. So that's what I would like to explore during this session. Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you, Alejandro. Thank you, everybody, for these overviews. And I agree, this is a very important moment. It's an opportunity we might not have again in the short term or the medium term to define a collaborative agenda and be able to become even stronger leaders in the topic of AI and all digital matters. I want to congratulate the dialogue on having representatives from all countries here. I think that's really exciting. Even though my last name does not suggest it, I am part Canadian. So Canadians, you are in this dialogue as well. Do not worry. And so what we're seeing is kind of three different countries that have collaborated and that do collaborate a lot. But here we have different kind of visions on the future of AI in a policy regulatory context. In Mexico, we have a huge reshuffle of the digital ecosystem. So what does that mean? In the US, we're seeing a very strong push towards competitiveness, towards innovation. There's a very clear drive over there. In Canada, we're seeing a slight shift towards a more flexible, innovation-oriented model. And so I want to start off with you, Kelly. Could you tell us a bit, if we want in North America an AI governance model that is interoperable but not homogenized, and if you can tell me how to say that word properly, that would be great. What 2 or 3 practical steps do you think that the 3 countries should prioritize first, and why now?
Yeah, I think the first one I would say kind of underlies, or it's an assumption that we're making with a lot of what we recommended in our chapter, which is that we come to an agreement on how to define risk, how to define, was it an evaluation? So when we use terms, we want to make sure that we're talking about the same things. And I think it's possible to have an agreement on these things, even if we don't agree on what you do about it. So as long as we can agree on how we measure the risk that an AI system poses, it doesn't matter if we disagree what to do about a high risk system, but we need to be talking about the same systems when we talk about risk. And so I think that's step one. And I think one of the reasons we didn't really talk about that in the chapter is that that's going to happen during the negotiations. It's not something that you're going to have as like a target, but it will come out because that has to be a thing that we're all talking about the same thing when we say these words. The second thing, and I think we had this as our number one recommendation for an annex to the MCA, which is to address cybersecurity. We need to be able to talk about how we're protecting ourselves, and we need to be able to work with one another on that. I think that also really gives us a nice basis to talk about tougher things. And if we can come up with a united regime for addressing cybersecurity risk, that's a pretty non-political, there's a lot of wins for everyone there. And I think that's a good place to start. Is first, let's talk about how we're going to protect ourselves and how we can jointly protect ourselves better as long as we're collaborating. And then the third thing is when we start to get a little stickier. The governance model is going to run into a lot of the deepest disagreements will be on things like data privacy, intellectual property rights, where you see Canada certainly, and I think Mexico also wanting a much deeper and more robust protection of those things, where I think the United States is going to come in wanting a lot more flexibility and freedom for companies to be able to operate. And there's something to be said for that. Companies need to be able to operate in an environment where they know what to expect. But the question is, how much can we give consumers something that they can, a predictable environment to live in where they know what to expect too, and they know what the protections they have. I think that's going to be very difficult for these three parties to come to an agreement on, especially with how we've seen the White House talking about AI regulation with the latest executive orders. But it is going to be really important for us to establish that. Without that, there's really no governance question that can be resolved because you're going to come back again to these questions of what rights do people have to train models? And what rights do you have to the output or how we use your input when we have the models trained?
Amazing. And so you've already kind of spoken about the main challenges that are going to be faced. You mentioned data privacy and IP. How do you think that this should be looked at? Can you tell us a little more? Can you delve into that bit a little more?
I think you really summarized it nicely when you were talking about what characterizes each country's current approach to AI. And I think the common theme there is that none of us have really got a very clear approach to AI governance. We're all still kind of figuring out. None of us have a broad framework in place. And that's going to be tricky. It's going to make the opportunities for misalignment are even higher because we all haven't really figured out what it is we're doing. And so we don't know how to express that to one another. Um, I think the United States having this very pro-innovation in the absence of any regulation is going to be the toughest challenge because any attempt to govern past a certain level is going to be met with some resistance from the United States. So it's going to cause problems, I think, with Canada and with Mexico. But I think there is a way um, to hammer out a governance system that's interoperable where the United States is able to give more flexibility than the other two countries are. Um, I like that some of the things that we were talking about where we can cooperate together. And it's about what are the wins? How can we sell this to the American administration with the wins? And so I think we recommend that we have trilateral funds for AI infrastructure. There's a lot of wins there. There's a lot of wins for Mexico. There's a lot of wins for Canada. And the wins for the United States is that this administration wants the American tech stack to be what you're building on. Well, if you want to build on the American tech stack, you have to have the infrastructure to do it. And I'm looking forward to hearing more from the other panelists who are focusing a lot on this question. But also the R&D. Innovation is not a zero-sum game. We like to pretend that it is a lot lately. But the more Mexican researchers and developers and entrepreneurs who are empowered to create things with AI, the better we all are off. And so it's in the United States' interest for us to have this joint win where we're working together and we're reestablishing our shared priorities, our shared values, and getting past some of those really sticky areas where we disagree more deeply. I think this also gives a lot of opportunities to fulfill some of the things this administration wants to do. They want to see American models as the basis for AI development. You do that by sharing funding for R&D with our friends and neighbors. So it's going to be all about, this administration it's a business-minded administration. What are the wins? What's the ROI? And how can you sell this collaboration in that framework?
I love that. That's great. Now, Pablo, speaking about that, I think Kelly highlighted Mexico's interesting position, kind of as part of Latin America, where a lot of our focus is on what the European Union is doing. But really, we're right beside the US. A lot of our things have to do with how the US is seeing things. Can you tell us a little bit? And again, I'm going to ask for 2 or 3 core principles or ideas that you think should guide Mexico's negotiating position in the 2026 USMCA review. so that it can really come to the table with a strategic position and not just a reactive one?
Thank you, Claudia. As was said in the prior table, CCA, I think, said that the main challenge of this review is that Mexico has to understand the privilege that we have in this revision to align regionally, but still regulate nationally. So this is probably one of the most complex things, especially if we understand that Mexico, as I said before, is right now having this situation which is in the early stages of governance. We have more than 200 initiatives in the Congress, which we have not, of course, not passed. So we have to first think of the definition of Mexico regarding the regulation, where we need a horizontal principle-based regulation, and then verticals, which have to do with many of the things that have been said in this table, no? Telecommunications, cybersecurity, privacy, intellectual property. But first we have to establish internally the framework, the regulatory framework that we are adopting, because as I said, this has been one of the most important challenges of our times, and we still don't know how to face this. Of course, what we have is a position of the US which allowed the Canada to realign their strategies, and I think we should go into that direction. It's wise to establish common visions, and therefore establish governance principles that address this problem.
Definitely. And you mentioned something that I really like, the definition. We have to find the definition of Mexico regarding the regulation. Like you said, we're still in very early stages of governance. There are a lot of proposals for regulation, none have gone through. Could you go deeper on how advanced Mexico is on defining this? And what do you think it would take for Mexico to really articulate a coherent vision on data governance that enables regional interoperability while really reflecting Mexico's realities, something that is truly possible?
Yes, well, that's a tough question, Claudia. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The first thing is we should understand where Mexico comes from. No, Mexico in 2017 had a government that understood technology, that was a participant in the international area where we tried to establish the importance of this new technology that was going to change the world, for saying it briefly. And then we had this administration change where we had 6 years without addressing the technology issue, where we addressed other issues, prioritized other issues, but left this AI development aside. Nowadays, we have an administration that is led by a scientist who believes in technology, but hasn't established a definitive view regarding AI regulation. We see several ministries that are taking participation in this regulatory effort or definition of public policies effort, but we still haven't seen who is having the leadership and who is calling the shots regarding the definition of governance. From my perspective, what we should have is, like I said, a horizontal regulation that is based on principles, and then we need to have the verticals that should have governance organization or institutions that are having participation of the developers, of the government, of course, of the academia, and of the social organizations. So with these common and shared views, we could have a more efficient governance institutions that might give answer to the regulatory problem of AI.
Thanks, Pablo. And on the topic of all of these changes, I think someone who can definitely enlighten us, is Elena. Elena, can you tell us about the changes in Mexico's digital institutional architecture? Just kind of highlight the most important ones. And what do you think, given this reshuffle, what do you think will matter most to promote trust among and predictability among our North American partners?
Well, that's one of the greatest goals that we have to attain, that is trust for everybody. And I will try to refer to the main changes because we have had so many. And first, the institutional transformation. It's a deep redesign of all the authorities and relationships. And we have new agencies, but also we have recentralization of functions. It's not only that we have new authorities, it's also that these functions and responsibilities that beforehand were independent or autonomous now are centralized in the executive branch.
Mm-hmm.
They're already, well, this passed through the disappearance of autonomous bodies. And some of these autonomous regulators that no longer exist were exactly those related to digital markets, to data governance, to competition. The creation of the Agency for Digital Transformation and Telecommunications and the new Telecom Regulation Commission, alongside the National Anti-Monopolies Commission, are coming to fill these spaces. Also with a digital authority that was given to other ministries. And this is shifting the balance between central government and regulators in raising questions about regulatory independence. And there are also many new rules and laws related to digital services, data instruction, and they are not at all located in the same laws. So it's also getting more complex to understand how all these changes interact. And we have also the provision, the direct provision of digital services and infrastructure to the public by new state-owned companies. Or well, maybe not all of them were new, but it is new that they are providing these services to the public. And all these changes might prompt discussions and revisions in the text. And some of the most important aspects of these impacts are new rules on digital identity, on data and platforms. A new unified identity platform is being created, and it will integrate biometric data. It creates new powers for the state that may access and handle personal data and could raise risks related to privacy, transparency, and automated processing. There are new tax provisions that allow direct and real-time access to platform data and also enable platform services blocking. And this will open a debate about proportionality, free trade, free speech, and continuity of digital services. These reforms may create regulatory asymmetries or also what we call fragmentation, and this implying a lack of interoperability. It's not only that the rules are different. So this calls for efforts to harmonize these systems. And that means that the agreement may require some updates in areas such as regional interoperability, on limits on state access to personal and corporate data, cybersecurity standards. I agree that cybersecurity can be a very strategic and initial point of collaboration, and also AI governance. In telecommunications, well, Mexico continues to have high spectrum fees, but also we have these new discount schemes on derechos, which are the highest part of the fees. So this might make it easier to go through this part. The rise in intellectual property and artificial intelligence, we have rising generative AI challenges and related to copyright mechanisms. And that relate to AI-generated derivative works, the use of data for training, and platform liability. Also, the centralization of databases and expanded access for authorities that I was referring to demand clear rules of governance, of traceability, and protection. So this might create an opportunity to evolve towards creating a permanent cybersecurity cooperation mechanisms. And this might call for increased collaboration on other aspects.
Thanks, Elena.
Oh,
sorry.
Yes. No, only two more points is about data localization and strengthening state-owned digital infrastructure. This is an area of tension with the agreements, commitments, and on cross-border data flows. And also, I have to mention that we need stronger protection for minors' data, algorithmic ethics, and digital accessibility. And these might become new pillars for a regional digital agenda that is more protective of human rights and in these digital spaces.
Thanks, Elena. I really like this last proposal of yours, and I think that it's really interesting that everyone agrees on cybersecurity potentially being a starting point for this collaboration. Wonderful. I will move on to Alejandro now. Let's talk about the backbone of it all. What do you think a coordinated regional spectrum and connectivity strategy should include to position the region effectively for the next decade? We need to start looking at the medium term a little bit. Could you highlight, let's say, 2 or 3 key elements of what that should include?
Sure, thank you, Claudia. First of all, regarding spectrum harmonization is vital. As you might know, there are different instances, international instances, in which the 3 countries participate. For example, the Inter-American Telecommunications Commission and the International Telecommunications Union. So I think it is quite important for Canada, US, and Mexico to work together prior to the different meetings of the different working groups in order to try to see as much as possible how to get into these meetings with a common agenda. So I know there have been talks all the time about the spectrum harmonization, but at the end, each country is reflecting its own, let's say, interests. So I think much harder coordination and cooperation among the 3 countries would be quite beneficial to work before these working groups and meetings and high-level meetings of these two instances, the CTEL, the Inter-American Telecommunications Commission, and the ITU. I think it's going to be crucial for having, let's say, a common strategy for the deployment of the new technologies, not only 5G but also 6G and other technologies. So that's one thing. On the other hand, I think it's also important to see that, and Elena just mentioned that about the neutrality, the competition neutrality from the government. No, I think it's important to make sure that in this new model here in Mexico, in which government-owned companies are also going to provide the services, I think competition neutrality is crucial, because otherwise there's not going to be, let's say, any interest of other companies to provide more services if they don't see that there's a field, a competition field that is playing. So I think it's important to make sure that government-owned companies that they don't have any specific benefits in comparison with commercial companies in the provision of services. So I think that's another point. And third point, I think it's important is consider connectivity not only for people, but only for the industry as a whole. I think if we are talking about nearshoring issues, or if we are talking about the deployment of more competitive, let's say, industrial production, we do need to have all these technologies in the industries, and we need connectivity for the industry. I'm talking about 5G local networks or private networks. So the US is already working on that a few years ago, but Mexico, I think we do have to work much more in private 5G networks that provide, let's say, the competitiveness that we need in order to have, let's say, a common global market with our partners. So those three key points I would like to highlight. Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you, Alejandro. Wonderful. I think you've all set a really interesting and complete overview of what is happening and what your analysis suggests should happen next. What I'd like to do now is another round of questions focusing on what would be the one concrete action you think should be prioritized for the USMCA review that could strengthen North American digital cohesiveness and competitiveness. Where should we start? You've already mentioned cybersecurity, so I'm going to take that one off the table and have you think about other ones. We'll go with you, Kelly. We'll continue in that order.
Yeah, I think looking at the 5 things that we were recommending in our chapter, I think the main one that I would say we have to walk away from the table with is mechanisms for secure data portability and transfer. I think the other things that we talk about, they're just as important, but there are other agencies in the American government and the Mexican and Canadian governments that can get those things done. We have an agency for cybersecurity. We have a copyright office that can talk about IP rights. Really, USTR, the trade representative, they're the ones who need to figure out the data portability and transfer. And this is something that's been a big part of past USMCAs. This is familiar territory. All we're doing here is updating it for the AI age. And I think it's imperative that we get it done. This is essential for business. And by extension of that, essential for individuals to be able to receive services or to understand what's going on. And this is going to be, I think, a key component of what this agreement is supposed to do. So that would be my number one thing.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. Pablo, on to you.
Yes, thank you. I agree totally with Kelly. Data portability is the main issue that we are addressing right now. And regarding that, we have to deal with privacy standards and data flow standards, and of course the implementation of the infrastructure that allows the data portability. So we also should put attention to the common views regarding infrastructure, data centers, etc. The investment in the backbones as we were talking about. So I think this is of course the priority, and not because it's not as important, but one thing that is for me also very important is the common criteria regarding the intellectual properties, because we see that now the regulation is being established or addressed particularly regarding the 2 main things about intellectual property, talking about generative AI, for example. First, the input that has so much to do with the way that these models are trained and how they get the information to allow their training, that has copyright issues. And then we have to talk about the criteria about the output, because regarding of the output, we have now some challenges that we have to face, where we have to establish if, first of all, if it's every legal system has its own way of addressing it, but if it has copyright regarding the rights to your work after using AI-generated tools, if the human intervention is definite or enough to address the rights of the property rights, or and even so, we have to address legal criteria regarding the creations of these technologies that don't have a transcendental participation of the user, of the human user, but still have a commercial value. We were talking about Spotify allowing music that is AI generated and generating income to the user that puts this creation in the market. So all those are things that have not been properly regulated, and we cannot think about individual regulations in the US, in Canada, and in Mexico. We should have common views and structured visions regarding these problems addressed by the new technology. So that would be my position in intellectual property. Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you, Pablo. Elena? We'll move on to Alejandro, and then we'll check on Elena again. Oh, go ahead, Elena. Perfect.
Oh, yes, I'm here. I'm here. Yes, I know that you asked for only one, but that is very difficult.
It is.
And also, this problem is systemic nature. So when you ask for only one element, we have to keep in mind that maybe this is a starting point, but we cannot solve or aspire to build a strong new digital agenda if we do not address many or a significant group of elements to put in place. So I will refer to a robust, interoperable data protection system, data governance, an integrated data governance that works for our three countries and make it interoperable, even if we have differences in specific laws and institutions. And because we need these cross-border frameworks so that our industrial systems can work easily crossing our borders, and so I feel this is essential for the agreement to keep promoting opportunities and strengthening these industrial relationships among our countries. Neutrality and clear rules for state participation, and that assures us to maintain a level or strengthen a level playing field. Markets are changing a lot very rapidly. And also, that's true that we have also inclusion gaps, and this affects human rights. We need to bring these services, to bring internet, to bring many digital services to people. So that's why a direct intervention by governments is just, and it's justified. But also, we need to assure that this participation does not distort markets that otherwise are working, but also working in a very difficult situation. We have some, for example, telecommunications carriers that work with very little margins, and so very small changes in market conditions might have huge consequences for investment.
Thanks, Elena. Alejandro?
Thank you. If I should say one common thing that the three countries should get, let's say, agree upon regarding telecommunications, I would say it would be frequency or spectrum harmonization. I think that's vital from the specifically from the telecommunications point of view. I completely agree with what Elena just mentioned regarding the neutrality from the government and having this certainty for investment. Spectrum prices also, I think it's a quite an issue here in Mexico. But if I would have to say what should the three countries should work in order to guarantee, let's say, the basis for this digital economy in general would be spectrum harmonization. It is important not only for the provision of services, but also to make sure that there are not going to be harmful interference when one country is providing one service and the other country is being affected from the provision of services in the other countries. We are seeing that when the US is deploying, for example, 5G networks in frequency bands in which Mexico is also is using, for example, satellite service. So satellite services in Mexico are being affected by the deployment of 5G services in the US. So that kind of coordination, I think, it is vital, not only, as I said, for the adequate and most effective provision of services, but to avoid these kind of harmful interferences when providing services, telecommunications services along the common borders of the three countries. Okay?
Thanks, Alejandro. Well, wow, that is a lot to consider. I don't think that the trade representatives back then, when it was first created, knew that when they put the review in place, knew that this would be so crucial and that this topic of AI would have exploded so much. So what an interesting analysis you've all done of the different aspects of this. I think something that's clear is that we all need to arrive, each country needs to arrive to the meeting with something, with strategies in place, with already working towards a common agenda. And I think that the biggest challenge here for Mexico will be having such little time to define this vision, to define kind of their strategic approach to these technologies. Although, like Elena said, the country's already moving forward in what this definition could look like at an institutional level. Now let's move on to the strategy. I really also liked that you all seem to agree on starting with cybersecurity. Let's all focus on protection first, which is such a big topic right now. And let's see how we can help each other protect each other better. I think that's a great starting point. Agreeing on how risk is measured, what does high risk mean, is also a very interesting point. And I take away the fact that maybe the most difficult agreements will have to do with IP and maybe even more data protection, where we need to continue working on that. Elena, I really liked, again, your focus on what about focusing as well as a second starting point on children, on human rights. How could that is something that worries the three countries. How could that also be woven into the conversation? And finally, the challenge that one of you mentioned as well has to do with competition neutrality in Mexico. What does it mean for state participation to be bigger? How can we ensure that this provides the same opportunities for everybody in this region? And the last topic that I pointed out is that, Alejandro, you mentioned as well, is ensuring connectivity not only for people, but for the industry as a whole. I think there's a lot of work ahead of us. The good thing is that we've all been working to contribute to this work, to contribute analyses, etc. So I very much hope that the trade representatives will dig into the different chapters written not only by the panelists here, but also the panelists in the previous panel. So I just want to thank everybody for being here. Thank you for taking the time to explore one of the biggest challenges right now, but also the biggest opportunity. I think it's a really exciting space, and I look forward to seeing what happens. So thank you, all of you, for your hard work. And I'm also speaking to the panelists in the previous panel, if you're still watching. Thank you, everyone who connected. We hope that we've we've kind of set an interesting trailer for the report. We hope you'll read it. And on behalf of the dialogue, I also want to thank everyone and let you know that next year there will be more events on this topic in Mexico, in the US, and they'll be excited to have you there and listen. So we look forward, Lila and Anna, to the invitations to these next events. Thank you so much for joining. We look forward to reading you and your comments on social media and in person. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.